And we will also have our keynote speaker, Karen, to give us a talk on ethnic studies. At 4:30, we will have an excellent panelists join us, a group of excellent panelists join us, implementing ethnic studies. And then we have, at 5 o'clock, we have breakout room. At 5:25, we pour out the breakout room. And at 5:30, we plan to close the meeting. So, okay, next slide, please. Okay, so APISBMA, I'd just like to give you some background about APISBMA. Can you go back to the,
Oh,
yes.
I'm so sorry.
Okay, that's okay. So in the state of California, there are over 750,000 Asian Americans, Filipinos, and Pacific Islanders students who attend K-12 public schools, which represents 12% of all students. The needs of API students are quite diverse and often overlooked. For nearly 30 years, APISBMA has advocated for an educational curriculum which more adequately represents the contribution and viewpoints of Asian Americans and Pacific Islander, and has developed coalitions with other education, ethnic, and community organizations to promote equitable and quality education for all children. So next slide, please. So we have 10 board of directors here, and I just want to thank all of them for their hard work, and we have accomplished a lot this year. So next, we have acknowledgements I like to make. We are very honored to have our first ever API CSBA president, Suzanne Kitchens, with us. And Suzanne, can you just, I think, okay, but with the share screen, I think people probably can see her later in the gallery view. We also have Xiaoning Cruz Gonzalez, CSBA past president. We have Gino Kwok, CSBA Director-Large, Asian Pacific Islander for 2019 and 2020. We also have in presence Amy Koo, CSBA Director-at-Large, API 2021 and 2022. Both of them are serving on our board, and I want to take this opportunity to thank Gino for his hard work. And I also like to thank Xiaoning for her great leadership in this past year. We have Alex Mambata, who is a UC Berkeley law student, who has been working with us as a non-paid staff advisor on ethnic study model curriculum campaign. So next. Okay, so APISBMA's involvement, I would just briefly talk about it. Last year, I think some of you have attended the breakfast meeting. We started our panel discussion on ethnic study, followed by table conversations. And in April 2020, APISBMA has a resolution in support of the ethnic studies model curriculum. And then in May, we have CSBA Ethnics School Board Association President joint letter in support of ESMC. And we have a press release on July 31st on the ESMC draft. Then in September, APISBMA ESMC convening and position paper on the September ESMC draft. Last but not least, last month, November, APISBMA submitted lessons and line edits, live public comments at November IQC meeting. So I also like to share with you, next slide, please. There are a few co-sponsor events. First, on February 28, 2020, it was hard to believe that we actually had a briefing on the coronavirus. It was a joint event by League of California Cities, API Caucus, APISBMA, and also Senator Richard Penn, chair of the Senate Health Committee. He's now also the chair of the API Legislative Caucus. July, we have API's Mobilized Youth Leadership Program at East Bay. In August, we joined an event. The title is Dismantling Systemic Racism in Public Education, webinar by California Latino School Board Association. Gino Kwok represented APISBMA as the panelist. And lastly, October 15, United We Vote, How School Districts Can Promote a Culture of Voting. This again is a joint effort by CLASBA, APISBMA, CAPS, and NALINO. I represented APISBMA as a panelist. Next, please. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Karen Korematsu, who is the founder and executive director of the Fred T. Korematsu Institute and daughter of the late civil rights icon, Fred Korematsu. Since her father's passing in 2005, Karen has carried on his legacy as a public speaker, educator, and civil rights advocate. She shares her father's passion for social justice and education, and in 2009, established the Fred T. Korematsu Institute to advance racial equity, social justice, and human rights for all. The Institute's work has expanded from K-12 civic education to promoting public civic engagement and participation. Karen crosses the country, speaking to audience from kindergarten to judges and inspiring and promoting Fred Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties and the Constitution of January 30th. Karen's work addresses current issues that draw upon lessons of the past. She has presented to many schools, universities, and organizations, including California Council for the Social Studies and to the National Council of the Social Studies. Karen has received numerous awards and honors, including the Asian Pacific American Institute for Congressional Studies Community Leadership Award in 2019. Please join me welcome Karen Korematsu as our keynote speaker. Karen?
Karen, you're on mute.
Karen, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay.
Thank you.
I thought somebody else was controlling the mute. So, you know, we're all still learning with Zoom how this works. So thank you, and my apologies. So I'll start again. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you to Cynthia and the board for the invitation, wonderful invitation, and the opportunity to speak to APISBMA about ethnic studies, especially for the state of California. Today is December 7th. 79 years ago, the Empire of Japan bombed Pearl Harbor. And of course, as we know, that was the start of World War II. But also that was the beginning of racism and being accused of looking like the enemy, especially for Japanese Americans. You know, it was a difficult time for me every year growing up because of the racism and the prejudice that I experienced when I was told it was my fault for the bombing of Pearl Harbor, starting in elementary school and even carrying on to middle school. And my brother experienced, you know, the same type of treatment and bullying. Now, I was born in Oakland, California, and went to schools in the East Bay in San Leandro, San Lorenzo. So it's, you know, not like I was on the East Coast. And these experiences of racism and prejudice are still deep-rooted in me. I could have taken two roads. I could have decided that to be angry about it and bitter and always walk around with a chip on my shoulder. But my father was my example, my hero. And he believed simply that the government was wrong and he was right to take a stand and not to report to the incarceration camps. But he never blamed anyone. He never blamed the government. He was never angry. And so fortunately, that was the type of household that I grew up in. But now here we are in 2020, and the pandemic here again has reared its ugly head in the form of racism and prejudice and negative rhetoric, with the quote of the president calling the pandemic the China virus. And then we've got the you know, the hate and the violence that stemmed from that, especially for Asian Americans. And even I'm reminded of in 1982, Vincent Chin was in Detroit, Michigan. It was the time of the auto workers, and we're struggling. Japan was doing very well in the auto industry, and we were importing cars from Japan. And he was beaten and killed by Detroit auto workers who mistook him to be Japanese. And these are kind of the systemic racism experiences that this country has really supported all these years. And so that's when my father gave me the charge about 5 months before he passed away. He passed away in 2005, and in 2004 he wanted me to carry on with education, because he didn't want something like the Japanese American incarceration to happen again. And he knew that if we don't learn the lessons of history, if we don't hear the lessons of history, that we're doomed to repeat them. Well, unfortunately, you know, people have short memories, but also because a lot of facts are distorted, and we don't have enough of the truth that needs to be taught in schools. And that's what ethnic studies brings to us. And so with the founding of the organization in 2009, it was about education, to focus on K through 12 curriculum about the Japanese American incarceration, of course, and my father's fight for justice, but how it relates to our issues today of you know, immigration and racism and civics, because that's really what we want for our children, is to have them grow into stronger American citizens. And so this is the journey that I've been on since 2009, and working with the National Council for Social Studies and the California Council for Social Studies and other state organizations. And then that is really my passion, because I know that we all have that opportunity to make a difference for our next generation. And if we all did just a little bit, You know, we can make that difference. And I applaud all of you who are members of APISBMA and other organizations, because my father said that in order to make a difference in this country, we need to participate. And, you know, he was, both my parents, my mother and my father, were involved in Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts and Boys Clubs and their church organization, and, you know, and worked in the polls at voting time. And so if everyone gave back a little bit, we would have a stronger and kinder country. And so this is the work that we're continuing to do, but now it's, you know, to be in 2020 and to realize, okay, we've focused on the Japanese American community and other civic issues, but now it's time to broaden our efforts and to work in ethnic studies, to work with other you know, minority organizations in education, because that's how we make a stronger America. And, you know, it was actually Superintendent Tony Thurman who I met when he was assembly member. I've been up to the Capitol several times because we do have Fred Korematsu Day of Civil Liberties in the Constitution on January 30th, even though it's not a holiday yet, we're working on it. But, you know, at least the Assembly and the Senate would recognize the day. The governor, by law, because it's now legislative law, is to recognize the day, and the superintendent is to encourage teachers to teach about my father's fight for justice and Japanese American incarceration. But also, more importantly, it's about our civil liberties in the Constitution. That's the full title to my father's day, and what that means for not only Californians, but for all Americans. And it's recognized in Hawaii, Virginia, Florida, New York City, and several now states have legislative bills in process. Of course, COVID has slowed down everyone, but it's encouraging to you know, to see the progress. And you know, because we need these types of people to have positive role models for students. There's certainly a lot of negative ones out there, and so my father brings that positive role model for all Asian Americans and the MEMSA community and the different ethnic groups that have been marginalized all these years. And you know, with Superintendent Thurman, he was you know, in this journey of this ethnic studies, and so he called me to speak for several different events. And I have to tell you and admit, I was shocked when he told me that that ethnic studies was not already a requirement for graduating seniors. I thought, oh my gosh, this is 2020. You know, what happened? I mean, I thought we were a lot further along in education for our students, and obviously, you know, we're not. And I'm a big believer that even though we didn't, you know, the bill didn't pass this time around, but we all need to keep pushing for ethnic studies to be in elementary and middle school as well as high school. Because, you know, what I've learned along the way is that, you know, unfortunately, a lot of seniors drop out of school before, you know, they are able to graduate. So they don't have a lot of the civics education. They don't have some of the ethnic studies that we are hoping that they will learn about. So starting young, even in civics, for elementary and middle school is so important. So that by the time that they reach high school, that they have a clearer understanding and experience of the cultures that are around them. You know, Asian Americans, I mean, Cynthia was talking about the statistics for California, but Asian Americans is the fastest growing population in the United States. That says a lot. That says a lot about the position and the opportunity that we have to keep pushing for education opportunities for all of our students, not just API students. And we need to all keep pushing together, on this. And even though Superintendent Thurman explained to me that he inherited basically this challenge of ethnic studies for graduating high school students, I don't think there was a lot of I guess thought and planning into a strategic plan into this process. And I know that there's these divisions that were set up for API, African American, Latino, and American Indian, but also the other organizations. We wanted to promote diversity and inclusion, and so they needed to be represented as well. But I work with Harvard, they're my education scholars that I work with, and what I was learning along the way, that the ethnic studies, the overview of ethnic studies, I mean, one semester is not very long, 16 weeks to pack in all these different ethnicities. And what I like to see is at least a semester that has focus on the overview of ethnic studies, and then to have these other disciplines that could be in another semester. We need to promote as much information and learning experience, because it really stems to like our issues of immigration today, right? We're all immigrants, unless you're American Indian, and indigenous in this country. We all are immigrants. That's our story, and it helps for students to have a bit more empathy if they understand the struggles of other ethnic groups. And so, the overview really should, first engage in a humanizing examination and analysis of ourselves and some of the historical origins of social inequities and racial trauma. Second, to examine and engage with theories and frameworks, curricula and strategies for enacting ethnic studies across, various disciplines. Third is to explore possibilities of healing-centered engagement in every aspect of our lives, and eventually the work that our graduating students will encounter. So it's, we've been Cynthia and I've been working with Cynthia and your board and the CDE on trying to be sure that the that the curriculum, the model curriculum, the ethnic studies model curriculum really has some context. And we've been pushing for this model minority myth, which really should be at the forefront of all these lessons, because it gives a foundation to really some of the inaccuracies and the racial trauma that Asian Americans experience. And I travel, I was traveling around the country. I hope to again someday. But I run into different people and organizations saying, oh, well, because I do advocacy work and civil rights advocacy and healthcare advocacy for the API community. Oh, well, Asian Americans don't need that. They don't need that kind of support. And then I have to start from scratch and explain to them and give them the facts of life. But if we had the education in our schools, then we would have more educated people, especially ones who are responsible for policy and our government. And that's why this to push for the proper guidelines for the Asian Pacific Islander ethnic studies model curriculum is important. And we're, we still got a long ways to go, right, Cynthia? We're still, and Alex is on this too. We are still fighting to make sure that these lessons are in place. And, and we need everyone's support. So, obviously the legislative bill, the 331 was not signed by Governor Newsom. And if you have an ear to him, he made this statement that, well, he's already signed a bill, ethics studies bill for, higher education. And it's like, well, so what's that have to do with high school? So somehow he's not getting all of the information. So we're going to have to start again, and we will. And I plan to be part of that process. And Superintendent Thurman has encouraged me to be involved in the next legislative bill, because it is important that we have this as a requirement, not just a subject, but as a requirement for graduating seniors. And we've started this process, and we hope that you will all support the model curriculum. It was because I was a little kind of puzzled. I thought, well, aren't we kind of putting the cart before the horse? We should have had the model curriculum in place before we had the legislative bill, but that's life and politics, as we all have learned. But at least if we now have something in place, then we have the grounds to say, okay, legislature, this is in place, and now we have an opportunity to really push this through, because now we'll have the curriculum for the teachers to rely on. And thank you to all the different leaders that are part of APISBMA that have put in your lesson plans. It's been really helpful, and I know a lot of you have worked very hard to make sure that these lessons are in place, lesson plans are in place, and we're very appreciative of your work. So as I'll conclude by saying what my father has said, to stand up for what is right. And when you see something wrong, don't be afraid to speak up. Thank you.
I have the honor and pleasure of getting to know Karen through this ESMC process. And for sure, we learned so much from her. And thank you again for your insightful speech. And so at this time, I would like to turn it over to Amy Koo, if Amy will take over at this point. Thank you.
And if Andrea could share the slides again, that'd be great. Thank you again, Dr. Korematsu, for that excellent keynote. And as you mentioned, many of us are disappointed that the graduation requirement did not get signed off by Governor Newsom. With that said, however, it is important that we continue to focus on how we can implement ethnic studies even at the local level. And that's why we've pulled together this panel, who the members of the panel, if we can bring up the slide, are from different facets within the school district. Okay, we have a teacher, we have a school board member, and we have a superintendent. And part of the reason for that is we want to make sure that there's a diversity of perspectives that are going to be shared in terms of how to go about implementing ethnic studies at the local level. Because just because there's not a statewide requirement doesn't mean that we can't get started. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Sarabjit Kaur Cheema, who's a trustee with New Haven Unified School District. And then we have Diana Nguyen, who's a history teacher at Sequoia High School in the Sequoia Union High School District. And lastly, Dr. Mary Sieu, who's superintendent of ABC Unified School District. So how this is going to work, we've got a list of questions already put together. If anything comes up, you can type your question into the chat box. We won't have a formal Q&A, but we'll be sure to get your questions answered, and we'll send something back out to the attendees.
So AB, you might want to remind everyone to stop our video, our video.
Yeah, and I think Andrea also mentioned that there's a way to highlight just the panelists. So we'll see how this goes. Let's see. Are you able to set that up, Andrea? Or should we just go with everyone turning off their video if they're not speaking? Oh, all right. Okay. Oops, Andrea, I think you're muted.
Go ahead and start, and I'll get the last person in.
Okay, sounds good.
Yes.
All right. So one of the first things we'll start out with are introductions. So I'd love for each of the panelists to introduce themselves, your background, current role, your district demographics, so we can see if there's something that connects with us, and how you became involved in ethnic studies. So first up, I will bring up Dr. Mary Sieu.
Thank you so much, everybody, for being with us today. This is my 9th year as superintendent of the ABC Unified School District, but it's also my 31st year being with the district as well. We have a population of a little bit over 20,000 students in ABC, and the majority of them are 45% are Hispanic Latinos, about 38% are Asian Pacific Islanders, about 8% are African American, and only about 5 to 6% are white students as well. But here's what I would like to share with all of you, and how I got involved with ethnic studies. I was a product of ethnic studies at UCLA myself, but I'm going to share that a little bit later with the first question. But because of the fact that I was born quite poor in the Chicago area, my parents are from mainland China, and I knew that in order for me to advance myself, I did not know how to speak English when I started school, and I knew that I had to know about education in order to advance myself. It was the incredible teachers that I worked with, as well as the students who I was a part of throughout my career in education. But by 8th grade, I knew exactly what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a teacher, just like my teachers who helped me get to where I am today. And so I just wanted to make sure that you knew a little bit about my background before I go on. Thank you.
Thank you. And next, Diana.
Hi, I'm Diana. I'm a teacher at Sequoia High School. I teach 9th and 10th grade. This year, Modern European Studies and World Studies. And next year, we'll be teaching Ethnic Studies for the first time in 9th grade. I'm a first generation graduate from working class parents. My mom did nails. I'm Vietnamese, if you can't tell by my last name. I graduated from Harvard and Stanford, where I got my teaching degree. And at Harvard, I did a lot of ethnic studies organizing. Harvard to this day does not have an ethnic studies department, that it continuously under resources. And I was a part of that to get a department and more faculty. And now in my district, I've been a part of an amazing community-led group to bring ethnic studies that was successful. And generally how I got involved in ethnic studies is I initially tried to run as far away from it as possible. Is that I saw my sister study ethnic studies. And I was just like, I don't really want to do government or nonprofit or public service stuff. But the questions I kept asking and what I saw in the world kept attracting me back to it. And so here I am, an ethnic studies teacher.
Great. Thank you, Diana. And last but not least, we have Sarabjit.
Hello, everyone. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in this session. I missed the CSBA's annual educational conference because I'm serving in my 10th year. I thought, let me have a break. But I didn't know that. It's good to connect back to all of you. I'm also a former high school math and science teacher. I am an immigrant. I was born and raised in the state of Punjab, not state, it's a province of India named Punjab. So our family immigrated to United States in 1991. It was very, very difficult circumstance that we have to come here. I was not very happy about that. My husband was a Punjabi language professor in India, and we were having a good life, but at the same time, there was a lot of social justice or economic justice movement going on in my state, which impacted our family badly. So my husband actually, he decided to move, and I just faithfully walked after him. So since we were from the educational background, and then I raised 3 sons, so they were going to the schools, and I was always interested in the education system here in the United States. I did some teaching as well here as a substitute teacher for some years, and I also taught at the Sieu Community College as a mathematics professor. So then I slowly, as all immigrants, we find our path. I found my path with all of my education. I passed the exam, state exam, licensing exam for civil engineers. And I served for California Department of Transportation for almost 20 years. This is my 10th year as a school board member. So like the problems, some of the problems you have mentioned, my 3 sons, we all have, they have turbans. My husband and my 3 sons, they have full hair. It's part of our faith, but I never had a turban. So right now, people, they're going through the China virus. After 9/11, it happened that there was all of the pictures we have saw on the TV. People, they thought my husband and people who have turbans on their head, they're all Islamic radicals, against the American values and everything. So in responding to that backlash, I decided to have a turban on my head, and start being more active in my local community, participated in the interfaith meetings. From those conversations, however, I never had any exposure to the political system because my education from India, master's in mathematics and before bachelor's in science, all was from kind of scientific background. I was a mom, wife, working full time, and never paid attention to how the political system works. So once I came out of my closet and started talking to interfaith meetings and the other community meetings, people actually, they asked me that I should run for the school board. I said, what is school board? So that's how the conversations started. And my PTA friends, they introduced me. And so another thing is when my sons, they came to my first son, actually, he became the age of the high school student. So then we also started thinking about having connection to our heritage language, Punjabi language. So I was very active to spearhead the community's effort to start that language. That's where I got the exposure to the ethnic studies program too at James Logan High School in Union City.
Great, thank you. And moving on, we'll start with Mary with the first question. And other panelists, if you have something to answer, just raise your hand and let me know. So Mary, what data supports ethnic studies? How does ethnic studies help to close the achievement gap?
Thank you for the great question. First of all, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a product of ethnic studies at UCLA. So when I went through the program in my doctoral program, I remembered that one of the things that fascinated me was the fact that people who take ethnic studies classes, they will learn so much more about themselves than they could ever realize. And I know that, for example, even in discussing ethnic studies of different cultures, for example, African American cultures, Hispanic Latino cultures, all of these things will add to a person's identity as well as understand what it takes to be in a different culture. And so I do know that, for example, with the data regarding supporting ethnic studies, there's plenty of data right now that supports ethnic studies programs. In our school district, we have a program with ethnic studies and cultural studies, for example, at one of our high schools that's been in place now. This is its 3rd year that we've been implementing this program. But so much comes from the personalization and the customization of people learning about their own cultures as well as other people's cultures.
Great, thank you. The next question is for Diana. So ethnic studies can get politically charged. How do you change that narrative?
Yeah, so that happened at our school board meeting when a lot of people mentioned like ethnic studies isn't ready yet. And I think it's important to address the elephant in the room of what are those politically charged areas of ethnic studies. You didn't include XYZ groups, so we have advocacy per individual group. You have the topic of Israel and Palestine, and that white people, feel bad, and that it's like spewing white hatred. But if anybody knows ethnic studies, to what Karen was mentioning it earlier, it's about healing. Because when we self-learn about these topics, when we are in our silos, Googling like Israel, Palestine on our own and not in community, when we like feel bad about ourselves and just, oh yeah, everyone's just trying to hate me, that's where it feels and where ethnic studies come in. Because we see difference, students see that. And even as adults, they see that too. So it's really about fostering community where you can ask really awkward questions with an adult you trust and an adult who has done the research, and any ethnic studies teachers know, like you get so much backlash. We know the political waters that we're walking in. So we got our T's, we dot our I's, cross our T's in planning a lesson material to create valid, well-researched questions where students have to wrestle with these kinds and build community in doing so. And is that political to ask hard questions, right? Is it political to have students reflect? Is it political to find healing and joy and be a little bit angry at times? That's what ethnic studies is. And anyone who knows what ethnic studies is knows it can't be simplified into such a binary, into brainwashing students. That's not what ethnic studies is.
Thank you, Diana. That's a really meaningful answer for that one. And then the next question is for Sarabjit. How do you get the superintendent to buy in? What are small steps a school board member can take to help start a movement?
So like we are doing it right now, education is the key. So we need to start with the educating people. I believe this is still a very, very new concept. Like Diana said, I think our own people, the minority people, our own means all minority people, we have some segment in us, and that does not mean that I'm included in that segment as well. Everybody has a learning curve. So we need to educate people that ethnic study, what is this about? So people, they have a preconceived notions, or sometimes people, they feel insecure. But I think for the last 20 years or so, with President Obama's election and other political changes, I do feel personally that people, they are generous, they're open. Of course, there are some people, they will, they will resist. But we need to understand that those people, they are in a minority. So we need to continue our path and have the conversations to talk to the superintendent or a school board member. First of all, I think, like I said, education. So we need to have the need demonstrated. So if we are planning to start it from the scratch, for example, any school district, so we need to have students or some teacher, they need to start the petitions and take it to the principal. If they, then from principal, it will go to the board or the superintendent. So if there is a resistance, then we need to come to talk to the school board members. Going back and forth, it will take some time, maybe a couple of years or more than that. It depends upon how many students they have signed up for that. So I think the first thing is we need to educate people and create the need, demonstrate the need. And there should not be a problem. If there is a need, the administration, they should respect that.
Thank you. Thank you. Then the next question is for Mary. What community partners can we work with, and what type of professional development or skills are needed for teachers and administrators?
Well, first of all, I do want to acknowledge that we have two of my board members with us today, and it's a former president of APISBMA. It's Sophia Say, as well as Ernie Nishii, who's also a delegate for our CSBA. But one of the things that we have done for the last several years is we've worked very collaboratively with our local colleges. For example, our Cerritos Community College as well as Cypress College, they have already indicated that they are implementing, for example, social justice convenings as well. And they also provide that to our own district administration, principals, assistant principals, counselors. They are all invited to these trainings on social justice, which is a part of the ethnic studies program. We also have professional development every Wednesday in the during the day to support teachers, as well as the skills that they might need to include, for example, an ethnic studies program. Because in our program at one of our high schools, it does include immigration, social justice, as well as the different ethnic groups that we provide.
And are there any particular skills like that teachers, administrators should have?
Well, I think it's very important that it depends on the naming of the course itself or the training that's involved. For example, social justice right now is very important for all of us in ABC Unified School District. And so when we provide that, it doesn't matter whether it's our own district personnel doing the training or whether it's conducted through, for example, CCEJ doing the training, but these are all very critical for us during this year.
Thank you for that. Next question is for Diana. How do teachers develop an ethnic studies course proposal that is authentic, meets local needs, and will be approved by the school board?
Yeah, so first I say working community is the most important piece because one teacher alone can't implement ethnic studies. And one teacher, I have so many blind spots, and it's important to acknowledge that. Even the diversity of the Asian community, I'm by no means an Asian American expert. So really speaking to peers about, especially teachers who have lived in the area. I'm from SoCal originally, and I never lived in the Bay Area. So asking for their advice, understanding where I don't understand, and seek where do I need to learn. So just asking a lot of questions to make sure you build a community that supports your curriculum. And from when you, for Sequoia High School in particular, we worked with Melissa Diaz as a colleague. She grew up in the Bay Area, went to a local school. I went to Claire Kirby, who's like who is Jewish and worked at Sequoia for a longer time. So together we put our brains together to create an authentic curriculum, and more importantly, unapologetic. I think that's the hugest piece about ethnic studies, is sometimes we'll make compromises so that it'll get passed. But really, if we stick to our vision of what ethnic studies should be and what, from talking to community, then we present it. And we have full love for our curriculum when we present it to the board. But that's because we built it in community. We are confident in the product that we create. How does it meet local needs? As I mentioned, find your blind spots and ask. Seek out, community programs. So next steps for us would be to talk to the local Boys and Girls Club, to some offices that work with, at-risk students, and ask what their needs are, make sure that they're at the center of the curriculum, students with disabilities, and SPED teachers, meeting that local needs. And also, so important is, we don't cover this, is local history. I'm in the Bay Area, and I don't know about I looked at the Korematsu is in San Leandro. I'm curious if all the students in San Leandro and East Bay know that, right? So really researching, not just talking about the national, but what is at home where change can happen. And how does it get approved by a school board? That's really tough. Is I kind of worked under I have my own power, and even if ethnic studies did not pass, I'm going to implement the themes of ethnic studies in my class, whether or not I get approved, right? As long as I know my curriculum's strong. But how does it get, I think we had a lot of teachers who were, I'm a third-year teacher, but teachers who've been in the district for a decade or so, reach out to school board members, introduce us, school board members reaching out, listening to teachers on the ground. So the school board, when we presented our product of love, was not taken by surprise. They were like, whoa, this is radical, right? But I think we looped them in and asked for their input. And they also reached out to us. So it's a labor of love to make sure it gets pushed.
Great. Thank you. That's very inspirational. that we can that it's a labor of love. Let's see. The next question is for Sarabjit. What are some of the funding resources available to support approval of the ethnic studies curriculum and LEA implementation?
Personally, I do think that we don't need to have any special funding. So because the program fits under the social studies curriculum, depends upon how the local school district puts it under. So the same funding, we are going to teach certain courses to our students. So this could be one of the options for them to take, or even the electives. So funding is there. I don't think personally that there is there might be some funding need for the new funding, so to speak, for the professional development, because it's a new course. But like I said, if there's a will, it can be obtained. There is a funding, professional development funding available. It's just to channelize it. So for us, in New Haven Unified School District, all of our 5 board members, can you imagine, we're all from the Asian Pacific background. Right now, there is one board member in this election. She got elected. We can say that she's white, but she's very, very open and very progressive. So we don't have any problem. And we were the leaders. New Haven Unified School District is a leader in the ethnic studies curriculum program. So we are actually now working on to make a ethnic studies academy. So there will be whole focus. So we are still working on it. So hopefully that will come to the fruition soon.
Great, thank you. And then the next question, it's kind of both to Diana and Mary. What are the pros and cons of implementing ethnic studies as an elective versus a course that's integrated into a history pathway throughout high school? I don't know who wants to start first. Mary, you want to
I can start.
talk about electives? Yeah.
Currently, our program in our district is an elective program, but it can be integrated into a history pathway, for example. I know that many of our teachers do integrate portions of the ethnic studies in their history program as well. I do appreciate the fact that both our board members, Ernie Nishii, as well as Sophia Say, indicated that we can also do special programs. For example, we have, in the last several years, we have conducted Day of Remembrance in all of our high schools. The Day of Remembrance is about the internment of our Japanese camps. And so we also provide these special programs during the day while students are in class. And so that's another way to integrate the program, whatever we call it, it's part of our history. And it's important to remember our history as a result of this Day of Remembrance that we've had in our district.
Great. Diana, your perspective on this?
Yeah, for our school, we were really thinking about that question because that was one of the counter arguments of why ethnic studies should be a whole class thing, why not make it an elective? And we really felt it was a signaling. It's something, we made it ethnic studies in 9th grade so that there'd be vertical alignment. That ethnic studies shouldn't be like this one semester class. It's a whole year with 9th graders and for Sequoia High School, we're bringing students from San Carlos, we're bringing students from Redwood City, students from all areas, and we want them to see difference at the 9th grade level. Setting the ethnic studies, we want to set the tone for our high school. And the content and also the skills to look at gender, race, and class, that we want it to be extended throughout their 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade year. So that's, and as an elective, it's sure there's more mature, maybe more mature students, but I always teach 9th grade and they can handle it. Right? 12th grade students, you know, they miss maybe that mentorship aspect of it as an elective. However, I think the pros of having as a 9th grade for everybody in school outweigh the pros of having an elective as a choice. Ethnic studies is a necessity.
Great. Thank you for that. I know we're running a little short on time. I guess I'll just try and barrel through the last couple of questions, and we'll start the breakout rooms maybe 10 minutes late if that's okay with everybody. So the next question is, how do you ensure that the adopted curriculum doesn't overlook the AAPI community if there's little representation on the governing board or small student population percentages? And that's for Diana.
Yeah, so there's a question of like, some folks aren't aware of the like Asian American history, right? And so then there's lessons out there that they can look for. But I think especially in my school district is 4% API. And in the sense that like the point of ethnic studies is to look across, see across difference, see yourself, and also build community. That's a really key piece. And so in talking about race in America, you can talk about Asian Americans, court cases who try to file for citizenship that brought together a man from the Caucasus Mountains who just tried to say that he's white, and then a Japanese man who tries to say he's white. So the Asian American identity, or just Asian identity, really fits into play with ethnic studies. And it might not be like a whole unit if the school like can be. It really depends. But there's definitely lessons available that, you know, it shouldn't be overlooked.
Okay. And then the next question is for Mary and Sarabjit. What are lessons learned from an established ethnic studies program for those who are starting out?
Mary, do you want to take it first?
Absolutely. First of all, I think it's quite clear that for students who would sign up for the ethnic studies class, just to say at a high school level, they have to know what it is that they're going to be gaining from it. And so I feel like it's important that they know how it's spelled out for them, as opposed to just having them go into something that they are not familiar with.
So I would like to add a little bit. First of all, we need to educate our own minority people. I remember when we started the Punjabi language program, I was spearheading that program. My own community members, they couldn't believe that course such as Punjabi language program can be a part of the mainstream curriculum. People, they had a lot of doubts. They asked me, is it approved from the CSU or UC? Is it just a regular course? That was the question lot of the times they asked me. How can that be? People, they were not ready to know that our own language got approved into the just regular curriculum. So I think same is true for the ethnic studies program. So people, they don't know about it, our own doubts, our own, we need to overcome those, lack and self-confidence, so to speak. And that's the purpose of this ethnic studies program. One of the main purposes. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And then a last question before we wrap up. What board policies or administrative regulations are in place to implement ethnic studies with fidelity? And how do you measure success, monitor progress, and continuously improve? And that's also for Sarabjit and Mary.
I'm going to take the first question because we do have board policies currently in our district right now. And it really looks at the positive school climate. It's about non-discrimination in our institutions. It's also parent involvement. Those are the three that I think are and has to be included in a policy for ethnic studies. I know that when Karen said that it was not approved by the bill that Governor Newsom signed just recently, I think that it will be signed at some point next year.
So Mary has said it very well. Most all school districts, let's say not all, but most of school districts, they struggle with the community engagement. And like my school district, we are like, I can say 85% minority. And we struggle too. So this is one of the token of kind of give them some stake in the system. The community needs to have the paradigm shift that this is our system. Any school system or the government system, because we are part of the group here, our demographics, they are showing that. So that sense of belonging or sense of owning the system, that needs to be shared with the more community members. So myself, I can tell you from my perspective, because I'm an immigrant, so it took me some time to change my thinking, change my paradigm shift that this is my system, I'm not going back. So I have to fight for my future, my kids, for myself. So these stories, like the sessions we are doing right now, like previous our motivational speaker, so those stories, they need to be shared with large communities. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And I can't believe it, our half an hour is up. For the last question, I'd love everyone, all the panelists, to leave with our audience. What's a key takeaway for our audience? What do you want us to remember? Maybe start out with Diana.
History doesn't have to be boring. It should connect, it should inspire, it should empower, right? It's not about memorizing facts, it's more about connecting to people. And I think ethnic studies is a perfect platform to do that.
Great, thank you. And how about Sarabjit?
For me, change is slow. So we need to be persistent all the time. That's what it takes. Don't give up.
Yeah, don't give up. Keep going. Yep, it's a long journey.
It's a long journey.
And lastly, Mary?
I feel that ethnic studies will be a requirement before graduation.
All right. So have that vision in your head. We're working towards that. But it's a long journey, so we can get started right now, absolutely. Right?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you to all of our panelists. It was such an insightful discussion, and I hope that it gives everyone food for thought as we enter our breakout rooms and kind of talk about the issues that are closer to us in a smaller group. But really, thank you very much. And next, we will move on to our panel discussions. If we can pull up the slide. Now, everyone had, when they registered, they signed up for a panel or a breakout session. So I have already preloaded those. We will stop the recording at that point when we do the breakout sessions. And we're starting 10 minutes late, so I'll make the breakout session a tad shorter. We will be resuming back to the main room at about 5:25. And for those of you who have never used breakout sessions before, you will be asked to join a breakout room. And so you have to click the button to join the room. And then I will be back in the main room helping anyone who is not assigned to a room or can't get into a room, or if you want to switch rooms, you can reach out to me. So I will make sure that, okay, let me stop